My hard-earned savings. My name is Rachel, and I'm 33 years old. I married Howard when I was 24, and we soon had our first child. Now, we have a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. I worked hard and saved money even before our marriage. I continued to save diligently after we married, and the amount grew significantly. I worked every day, and the money I gradually saved was not only a source of pride but also a comfort. It was like insurance for when something happened, to ensure our children wouldn't struggle in the future. I never imagined this money would be used for something like this. Just because we are married doesn't mean everything is forgiven, especially when it comes to spending money. Howard only contributes the bare minimum for living expenses, so all the savings for myself and our children come from my salary. I really wish he would cooperate more, but whenever I bring up money, he gets upset and even takes it out on the kids. So we've established a rule not to talk about money at home. Howard seems careless about money and doesn't think much about our children's future. I returned to my job when our daughter was 3 years old, and after 2 years, I am earning as much as Howard. However, I purposely hold back to avoid hurting his pride, but that's a secret. One day, my mother-in-law suddenly visited our home. I was working from home, but when I opened the door, she was in tears, clinging to me. "Rachel, please. I need to stay here for a while." Surprised, I let her in. "What happened, Mom?" I asked. She began to cry even more. "My husband wants a divorce." I couldn't hide my shock. My in-laws were known as a loving couple in our neighborhood, always showing a united front. I couldn't understand why they were suddenly talking about divorce. Unable to say anything, I just stood there. For the time being, I decided to listen to her. "Mom, calm down. Why did he suddenly bring up divorce?" I asked. She sobbed and said, "I haven't done anything wrong. But he just told me he can't stand living with me anymore. It's too much." I was confused. It didn't seem like my kind father-in-law to demand a divorce without reason. I suspected my mother-in-law was hiding something. I calmed her down and decided to wait for Howard to come home from work. When Howard came home at night, after putting the kids to bed, we started discussing it with my mother-in-law. "Mom, why are you talking about divorce?" Asked by Howard, she started crying again. "I want to know that myself. I've worked hard for my husband all these years. And suddenly he says, 'I can't stand living with you anymore.' Can you believe it?" While I doubted her words, Howard and I decided to talk to my father-in-law to hear his side, as we couldn't discern the truth from just my mother-in-law's story. What was he thinking? We needed to know the truth, since we were getting nowhere with my mother-in-law's story. Howard and I decided to talk directly to my father-in-law. That night, Howard called him to explain the situation. My father-in-law apologetically said, "I'm sorry for troubling Rachel." And we arranged to meet him the next day. The next day, after sending the kids to school, Howard and I went to my father-in-law's house. He welcomed us and started talking in the living room. "Actually, my wife has spent all of my savings, which was $100,000. I was shocked and curious about what she had spent such a large sum on. "What did she spend $100,000 on?" I asked. He sighed deeply. "She just claims it was for living expenses, but that's impossible. I've been giving her a fixed amount for living expenses every month, and even an allowance on top of that. Yet, she managed to spend such a large sum." Hearing this, I was convinced that my mother-in-law was hiding something. She often came to our house asking for money casually. I grew suspicious of her actions and was determined to uncover the truth. That night, my mother-in-law came to our house again. Upon hearing my father-in-law's story, she exploded in anger. "That's a lie. I haven't done anything wrong," Howard said. "Just return the money, and you won't have to divorce, right?" She retorted, "I don't have that kind of money. I only used it for living expenses and didn't do anything wrong." When Howard suggested, "Rachel has saved a lot of money," something in me snapped. I had reached my limit. "I cannot lend my savings. If you really need it, borrow it from your husband," I declared. Howard got angry. "Get real. How can you refuse to lend just $100,000 when my mom is in trouble?" At that moment, I made up my mind. "Then you prepare $100,000. It's just $100,000, right? You can manage that amount, since it's just a trivial sum for you." I unleashed all my anger. Howard was stunned into silence, but I felt there was no turning back. Being married doesn't mean everything is forgiven. Money matters are critically important, as they directly affect the future of the entire family. I was determined to stand up and protect the future of myself and our children. I met Howard when I was 24. It was Howard who comforted me, who was exhausted from work. I was drawn to his kindness and inclusiveness, and we quickly fell in love. We decided to marry just 6 months after we started dating. Our wedding was modest, but we were happy. Soon after, I discovered I was pregnant, and we were overjoyed. During the pregnancy, Howard took great care of me and was very considerate. His support was the reason I could approach childbirth with confidence. When our son was born, our hearts were filled with joy to welcome a new member to our family. Parenting was a new experience for us, and although it came with many anxieties, we overcame them together. Later, our daughter was born, making our family even livelier. Our children have grown up healthy without major illnesses. Our son has made many friends at school and plays energetically. Our daughter enjoys her time at daycare and shows us her smile every day. I returned to my previous job when my daughter turned 3. 2 years have passed since then, and now I earn as much as Howard. I am highly valued at work and find my job rewarding. However, I sometimes hold back to avoid hurting Howard's pride. A significant portion of our household income comes from my salary, and our savings have gradually increased. Howard only contributes the bare minimum to the living expenses, and I always manage the household finances. Discussing money makes Howard irritable, so we've established a rule not to talk about money within the family. Despite this, I've continued to save diligently for our children's future. There have been occasional frictions in our marriage, but I have endured for the sake of our children. I have prioritized our family's happiness and worked with Howard to maintain our home. However, the recent incident with my mother-in-law has threatened to upset this balance. The sudden visit and divorce turmoil caused by my mother-in-law and the confession from my father-in-law have drastically changed our family's future. I've begun to seriously consider how to rebuild our life and protect our children's future. It's time to reassess our relationship and family dynamics. That day, I was working from home. Normally, I'm too busy to stay at home, but luckily, I was working there that day. While focusing on my work, the doorbell suddenly rang. Looking at the screen, I saw my crying mother-in-law. In a rush, I opened the door, and she pleaded while crying. "Rachel, please. I need to stay here for a while." Amidst my surprise and confusion, I invited her in and sat her down in the living room. "Mom, what happened?" I asked. Wiping her tears, she began to speak. My husband is demanding a divorce, she said, trembling. I couldn't believe my ears. My in-laws were our role models as a couple. They always seemed to get along well and respected each other. I couldn't understand what could have led to talk of divorce so suddenly. He suddenly said he can't stand living with me anymore. I haven't done anything wrong. My mother-in-law continued to sob and plead. I felt something was off. It didn't seem like my gentle father-in-law would say such a thing without reason. I began to suspect there was a significant issue being concealed. As far as my mother-in-law's story went, she appeared entirely blameless. However, knowing my father-in-law's character, I couldn't believe he would make such an unreasonable statement. Feeling that we couldn't grasp the truth from her words alone, I decided we needed to hear from my father-in-law as well. That night, when Howard returned home, I put the kids to bed and then started a conversation with my mother-in-law included. When I explained the situation to Howard, he too was surprised and asked, "Mom, what really happened?" She broke down again. He suddenly said, "I can't live with you anymore. I haven't done anything wrong." Like me, Howard felt it was unlikely for his father to say such things. We agreed that we needed to speak directly with my father-in-law, and we planned to visit his house the next day. We calmed my mother-in-law and decided to let her rest for the night. The next day, Howard and I visited my father-in-law's house to hear his side of the story. He welcomed us and began speaking in the living room. "Actually, my wife has spent all of my savings, which was $100,000. Hearing this, I was both shocked and convinced. What did she spend $100,000 on? I asked. My father-in-law sighed deeply and answered. She claims it was for living expenses, but that's impossible. I've been giving her a fixed amount for living expenses every month, plus an allowance. Yet, she managed to spend such a large sum. Hearing my father-in-law's story, I was convinced that my mother-in-law was hiding something. She often casually asked for money when she came to our house. My suspicions about her actions grew, and I was determined to uncover the truth. That night, my mother-in-law came to our house again. Upon hearing my father-in-law's story, she became furious and shouted, "That's a lie. I haven't done anything wrong." Howard said, "Just return the money, and you won't have to divorce, right?" She countered, "I don't have that kind of money. I only used it for living expenses and didn't do anything wrong. I had reached my limit. I cannot lend my savings. If you really need it, borrow it from your husband," I declared. Howard lost his temper. "Come on. How can you refuse to lend just $100,000 when my mom is in trouble?" At that moment, I decided. "Then you prepare $100,000. It's just $100,000, right? You can manage that amount, since it's just a trivial sum for you." I unleashed all my anger. Howard was stunned into silence, but I felt there was no turning back. Being married doesn't mean everything is forgiven. Money issues are critically important, as they directly affect the future of the entire family. I was determined to stand up and protect the future of myself and our children. Howard and I arrived at my father-in-law's house and faced him in the living room. He looked exhausted, as if carrying a heavy burden. With a quiet sigh, he began to speak to us. "Actually, my wife has spent all of my savings, which was $100,000, he confessed in a grave tone. I was shocked by his words and gasped for a moment. It was necessary to find out how such a large sum of money had been spent. What did she spend the $100,000 on? I asked. My father-in-law sighed deeply before answering. She only says it was for living expenses, but that can't be true. I've been giving her a fixed amount for living expenses every month. And even an allowance on top of that. Yet, how she managed to spend such a large sum. His words raised doubts in me. It was clear that my mother-in-law was hiding something. He continued, I can no longer live with her. The trust has completely broken down. His words were tinged with deep disappointment and sadness. After hearing his story, Howard and I decided to return home. We felt that we had to do something about my mother-in-law. When we got back, she was waiting in the living room, her face marked with anxiety. Mom, we heard from Dad. Why did you spend $100,000? I asked directly. My mother-in-law averted her eyes for a moment, sighed, and answered. I only used it for living expenses. There's nothing more to it. Unsatisfied with her response, I pressed further. Is that really all? He said that his trust is completely shattered. There must be a significant reason for that. My mother-in-law was silent for a while, then began to speak with tears in her eyes. Actually, I've been going to a nightclub. It started when a friend invited me, but gradually I got hooked. I was astounded by her confession. I had never imagined that she was visiting nightclubs and spending a fortune. Why would you do such a thing? I was at a loss for words. She continued, I was lonely. My husband was always busy with work and stopped paying attention to me. Before I knew it, I just couldn't stop spending money at the nightclub. I felt a mix of emotions upon hearing her confession. I could understand the loneliness and sense of isolation, but it didn't justify spending $100,000. Her actions had become a serious issue involving the entire family. That night, Howard and I discussed it again. We needed to consider as a family how to resolve my mother-in-law's issue. Howard suggested, for now, let's persuade Mom to pay back the money. But I felt that wasn't enough. I think she needs professional counseling, I suggested. If we don't address the reasons she became dependent on nightclubs, she might repeat the same behavior. Howard agreed with my suggestion, and we decided to persuade my mother-in-law to undergo counseling. The next day, when we spoke to her about it, she initially resisted, but ultimately she accepted. We pledged as a family to cooperate in resolving her issue. Being married does not mean anything is forgiven. It's crucial to trust and support each other. Through this incident, our family bond deepened further. The revelation that my mother-in-law had been frequenting nightclubs and had spent a large sum shocked our family. I could understand my father-in-law's disappointment and my mother-in-law's loneliness. However, we needed to find a solution as a family issue. We took her to counseling to address her issues. Initially resistant, she gradually accepted the counseling. It was necessary to support her as a family to alleviate her feelings of loneliness and anxiety. My father-in-law also began to make efforts to repair their relationship. He reduced his focus on work and started spending more time at home. My mother-in-law also reflected on her actions and worked to rebuild the family bond. Howard and I also worked to support the whole family, to prevent my mother-in-law from becoming dependent on nightclubs again. We regularly accompanied her to counseling sessions, supporting her as a family. My father-in-law also increased communication with her, continuing efforts to deepen their understanding. While her issues wouldn't be resolved overnight, we were making gradual progress by cooperating and supporting each other as a family. Through this experience, we reconfirmed the importance of trusting and supporting each other. Our family bond grew stronger and more resilient through this ordeal. It's important to face issues as a family and work together towards resolution. Being married does not mean anything is forgiven. Only through mutual trust and support can a family truly be strong. While dealing with her issues, a new ally appeared in our family life. It was my sister-in-law, whom I had always found difficult to get along with. From the beginning of my marriage, we had clashed numerous times. And she had a cold attitude toward me because she doted on Howard, her brother. However, the situation changed drastically when my mother-in-law's issues came to light. My sister-in-law visited our home and started talking with a serious expression. "Rachel, I need to talk to you." I listened attentively, albeit a bit nervously, to her words. "Actually, I've also had my doubts about Mom's behavior for a while," she continued. "The days when Mom didn't come home started to increase, and when I asked her about it, she often evaded the question. That's why I was worried there might be a problem." Hearing her words, I felt both surprised and grateful. She had been thinking about what she could do for the family as well. When I found out that Mom had been going to the nightclub, I was honestly shocked. "But that's exactly why I think we need to work together as a family to solve this," she continued. With her cooperation, we were able to work together more effectively on my mother-in-law's issues. She actively participated in supporting my mother-in-law's counseling sessions with my husband and me. Her presence was also a great support to my mother-in-law. Moreover, my sister-in-law opened up to me. She apologized for having been cold to me because she doted on her brother so much. "I've been reflecting on the past. From now on, I want to cooperate more as a family," she told me, and tears welled up in my eyes. As my relationship with her improved, the bond within our family as a whole strengthened. While my mother-in-law's issues were still a work in progress, the support from the entire family allowed us to feel that we were making gradual progress. The unexpected support from my sister-in-law became a great hope for us. Families can sometimes disagree. However, by supporting and cooperating with each other, we gain the strength to overcome difficulties. Improving my relationship with her was a new step for our family. Through this experience, I deeply felt the importance of family and the power of our bonds. While my mother-in-law's issues are not yet completely resolved, I believe that by cooperating and supporting each other as a family, we can definitely overcome them. My sister-in-law's presence brought us new hope. As my mother-in-law's issues began to settle down and the family was slowly regaining peace, I noticed that my husband, Howard, was plotting something new. He was using my mother-in-law's issues as a reason to try to draw more from my savings. "Rachel, with Mom's situation and all, I want to have a bit more leeway in our finances," Howard said. Feeling uneasy about his words, I decided to handle it cautiously. Just because we are married, not everything is permissible. Especially when it comes to money, we must be careful. One day, I accidentally overheard Howard and my mother-in-law talking in the living room. "Mom, can you convince Rachel to let us use more of her savings?" Howard said. And my mother-in-law replied, "That's a good idea. I'll help." I felt shock and anger at their words. I couldn't allow the money I had saved for the family to be used in this way. I decided to take action immediately. The next day, I set up a time to talk with Howard. "Howard, I overheard your conversation with Mom. Are you honestly trying to draw more from my savings?" I confronted him. And he looked surprised at first, but then changed his attitude. "Rachel, you misunderstand. I just want to provide a little more comfort for the family." He defended himself. I firmly responded. The money I've saved is intended for use by the children and me. Just because we're married, it doesn't mean everything is permissible. Stop trying to use my savings without permission. Howard was silent for a while, but perhaps realizing my serious stance. He eventually promised, "All right, I won't bring up the savings again." I was relieved by his words, but I couldn't fully relax. Later, I had a similar conversation with my mother-in-law. "Mother, please stop depending on my savings. I'm willing to cooperate for family needs, but I can't allow you to use it selfishly," I told her. Initially, she tried to argue, but seeing my serious expression, she eventually agreed. Through this event, I learned the importance of standing my ground. Even within a family, it's important to assert oneself. Especially with financial matters, careful handling is necessary. I am determined to continue standing firm to protect my family. As my mother-in-law's issues settled down, and the family was slowly returning to normalcy, I was faced with another shocking fact. After the issue of my mother-in-law going to the nightclub came to light, more about the situation began to be revealed. One day, while thinking about the family, I was sitting quietly in the living room when my sister-in-law called. "Rachel, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice tense. Sensing that something significant had happened, I immediately headed to her house. When I arrived, she led me to the living room and urged me to sit on the sofa. "Actually, I found some photos from when Mom was going to the nightclub," she said. I was shocked and realized anew the severity of the issues my mother-in-law was facing. My sister-in-law took out her smartphone and showed me several photos. There was my mother-in-law, looking happy at the nightclub. And the photos included scenes of her handing large sums of money to the nightclub worker. I was speechless and stared at the photos. Why would she do this? I muttered. My sister-in-law put her hand on my shoulder and said, "I think Mom was lonely. But that doesn't make it right to do this. We need to support her." I nodded deeply, determined to do everything I could to help my mother-in-law. The next day, I visited my mother-in-law again to talk. She was initially surprised by my visit, but when I showed her the photos, her face went pale. "What is this all about?" I demanded. She was silent for a while but eventually began to speak through tears. "It was just for fun at first. But gradually, spending money became a pleasure. And before I knew it, I couldn't go back," my mother-in-law said, her voice trembling. I was pained by her words, but I felt a strong resolve to do what was necessary for the family. "Mom, we want to help you. But if things continue this way, the whole family will fall apart. So, please, take counseling seriously and resolve this issue," I urged her earnestly. She wiped her tears and nodded. "I understand. I need to change," she said. Afterwards, my sister-in-law and I took turns supporting my mother-in-law as she attended counseling regularly. We worked on resolving the issue as a whole family. While her problems wouldn't be solved overnight, there was a real sense of progress being made. Through this ordeal, our family bond deepened even further. My mother-in-law also reflected on her actions and made efforts to rebuild her relationship with the family. Watching her change, I was reminded of the importance of supporting each other as a family. As her issues gradually started to resolve, I faced a greater betrayal. One day, I noticed that Howard's behavior was different after he came home. He seemed unusually restless and avoided eye contact with me. "Howard, is something wrong?" I asked, but he simply answered, "It's nothing." Feeling uneasy about his behavior, I decided to check his phone one night. Normally, I wouldn't do such a thing, but I felt something significant was being hidden. When I opened his phone, I found exchanges with an unknown woman. He had been in frequent contact with her, and it was apparent that they had been out to dinners and outings together. My heart froze instantly. My husband was betraying me. That night, I confronted Howard. "Who is this woman?" I asked, showing him the screen. He looked shocked at first, but quickly regained his composure. "She's just a friend. There's nothing inappropriate," he explained. However, I was not convinced. "This is too intimate for just friends. It's not normal to communicate this often and go out together," I pressed. Howard was silent for a while but eventually seemed resigned to explain. "Actually, we met through work, and at first, we were just friends. But gradually we became closer." "I'm really sorry," he apologized. Rage and sorrow welled up within me. His betrayal was unbearable. "Why didn't you tell me? We're supposed to trust each other as husband and wife," I demanded through tears. Howard apologized. "I'm really sorry. I promise it won't happen again." But his words didn't reach my heart. Later, I decided to tell my mother-in-law about this fact. She was shocked and deeply saddened. "I'm really sorry that this has happened," she said with tears. Her words offered me some comfort. But my distrust towards Howard didn't disappear. Our family was facing another significant challenge. While my mother-in-law's issues were heading towards resolution, a new problem had arisen with Howard's betrayal. I felt I had to overcome this situation for the sake of our children. The fact that Howard had betrayed me shook me deeply. Just as my mother-in-law's issues were beginning to resolve, our family was hit by another difficulty. Howard repeatedly apologized and vowed never to repeat the same mistake. But my trust in him had completely collapsed. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept thinking about the future of our children and my own happiness. Should I stay with Howard, or should I choose a new path? Was it really good for our family to continue this marriage? I deeply pondered. In the morning, I resolved to bring up divorce with Howard. Before he left for work, I started the conversation calmly. "Howard, I think we can't stay together anymore. Let's get a divorce," I said. And he looked shocked. "Rachel, are you sure about this? Can't you reconsider for the children's sake?" Howard pleaded. But my decision was firm. For the children's sake, we need to be happy. Now that trust is broken, it's impossible to stay together, I asserted firmly. Howard was silent for a while but eventually seemed to accept. "All right. I'll do whatever I can for the children," he replied. I felt slightly relieved by his words. Yet I carried a mix of anxiety and anticipation for my new life. Afterward, I considered how to explain this decision to the children. It would be a sudden change for them, and I needed to explain it as gently as possible. Howard and I gathered the children in the living room and began to speak quietly. "Mom and Dad have decided to live separately from now on. But we'll still work together to live happily, okay?" I explained kindly. The children were initially shocked, but seemed to gradually understand as we explained. Later, I started looking for a lawyer to proceed with the divorce, and began gathering the necessary documents. Howard was cooperative, and the process went smoothly. We both focused on respecting each other and choosing the best approach for the children. As the day the divorce was finalized approached, I made a new resolve in my heart. From now on, as a single mother, I was prepared to protect and raise my children with all my strength. With support from my parents and sister-in-law, I prepared to step into a new life. The divorce was finalized, and my new life began. I moved back to my parents' house with the children, and we rebuilt our lives with their warm support. My parents welcomed us warmly, not only taking care of the children but also being a support for my emotional well-being. My sister-in-law was also supportive of our new life. Initially, she was someone I found difficult, but now she has become a trusted member of our family. She often visited to help us adjust to the new environment, offering advice and playing with the children. My father-in-law also lent his support to our life. He had moved past the issues with my mother-in-law and was making efforts to deepen the bonds within the family again, while my mother-in-law continued counseling and gradually changed. There were still uncertainties about her behavior, but we felt a real sense of progress as the whole family supported each other. One day, my father-in-law said to me, "Rachel, I'm truly sorry. As a family, we should have noticed sooner. But from now on, I'm committed to supporting you all fully, so let's work hard together." I was deeply grateful for his words, and tears spilled from my eyes. Even after the new life began, I was busy with work and parenting. Thanks to the support from my parents, my sister-in-law, and my father-in-law, I managed to maintain our lives. Yet, occasionally, feelings of anxiety and loneliness still surfaced. During such times, my sister-in-law would say to me, "Rachel, don't bear it alone. We're here for you, so feel free to talk about anything." Encouraged by her words, I found the strength to look forward again. Together as a family, we gradually adjusted to our new life. My workplace was also understanding and flexible about my situation. My boss and colleagues, knowing my family circumstances, adjusted my work schedule and provided tremendous support. I was grateful to my colleagues and maintained my motivation at work. As our new life began to stabilize, I noticed that the new environment was having a positive impact on the children. They had become accustomed to their new school and friends and were enjoying themselves. Seeing their smiles assured me that choosing this new path was the right decision. The day I filed for divorce, I felt the beginning of a new life. The difficult days seemed like a lie, and I was hopeful about the future. Committed to building a new life with my children, I resolved to move forward step by step. We moved to a new home, and the children started attending a new school. Although initially anxious, they quickly adapted to their new environment and enjoyed their school life. I adjusted to balancing work and home life in our new setting too. With the support of my parents, my sister-in-law, and my father-in-law, I managed to enjoy life in our new environment. Despite the hectic days, I cherished the time spent with my family and deepened the bond with my children. Months into our new life, I began to find time for myself again. I resumed my hobbies and socializing with friends, finding space to enjoy my own life. The children saw my cheerful demeanor and felt reassured. In this new chapter, I reconfirmed the importance of family and discovered my own strength. We had regained a sense of normalcy. At my parents' home, where we lived, they welcomed us warmly, enjoying the children's growth and providing us with support. My performance at work improved, and I managed to balance my career and home life well. My bosses and colleagues were understanding and flexible when needed, and I continued to strive towards new goals daily. The children made new friends at school and enjoyed their daily activities. They were growing rapidly, with my son quickly adapting to the new environment and demonstrating leadership, and my daughter happily spending time with her new friends. One day, I decided to take the kids to the park, where I watched them play joyfully. This moment made me feel profoundly happy, realizing that all the challenges we had faced were worth it for moments like this. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I had coffee in the living room with my parents. My mother encouraged me. "Rachel, you're doing so well. We're here to support you, so let's keep working hard together." My father added, "If you need anything, just ask." I was truly grateful for their words and resolved to continue supporting each other as a family. My sister-in-law also became actively involved in our life, frequently visiting to play with the kids and offer me advice. Her presence had become a significant source of strength for our family, and I was grateful for her support as a member of our family. My mother-in-law was also beginning to change. Through continuing counseling, she faced her issues and worked on repairing her relationship with the family. Although her changes were small, each step was a significant hope for our family. Since starting our new life, we had learned and grown a lot. Overcoming difficulties reaffirmed the importance of each other and deepened our bonds. We might face many challenges ahead, but as a family, we were prepared to face them together. I vowed to continue spending time with my children with a smile, building a happy future. With the support of my parents, my sister-in-law, and the whole family, we would enjoy our new days. Keeping our family bonds strong, we would build a happy future, advancing step by step. This new life had settled, and we were enjoying peaceful days. As a single mother, I had adapted to this lifestyle, cherishing my time with the children while dedicating myself to work. My goal was to provide a stable future for my children and support their pursuit of dreams. One evening, while enjoying dinner with the kids, my son exclaimed, "Mom, I want to be an engineer when I grow up." Surprised and delighted, I responded, "That's a wonderful goal. I'll support you." My daughter also energetically shared, "I want to be a florist." Hearing their dreams made me even more hopeful for their future. Supported by my parents and my sister-in-law, I was determined to do everything possible to realize my children's dreams. Providing a safe environment for them to grow and giving them the necessary education and experiences felt like my mission. I also felt it was essential to continue my own growth. I decided to make every effort in acquiring new skills at work to build my career. It was important for me to be a solid role model for my children. Since the new life began, I have learned a lot and grown. Overcoming difficulties allowed me to reassess my strength and the importance of family, enabling me to move forward positively. Although many challenges might await, I trusted in my strength and my family's support to continue progressing step by step. Our family's bond has strengthened, and we were united in moving towards the future. There will be joys and sorrows ahead, but we have the strength to overcome them. I will be committed to spending time with my children with a smile and building a happy future. The conclusion of this story signifies a new beginning. Our family has overcome past difficulties and is moving forward into a new future. Life as a single mother isn't easy, but I vowed to remain strong and positive for my children. We will continue to cherish our family bonds while building a happy future. My mission is supporting my children's dreams and providing a secure environment for their growth. In our new life, our family will live even stronger and happier.